Why would a dead person need nearly 0.8 kilograms of cannabis in their grave? That is what makes a roughly 2,700-year-old tomb at the Yanghai cemetery near Turpan in western China. So unusual. Archaeologists did not just find a few scattered plant seeds. They found about 789 grams of cannabis preserved in a strangely good condition, placed with the dead in a burial context. A quantity large enough to make anyone pause. Was it medicine? A ritual object? A sign of status? Or something the living believed the dead would still need in the world beyond? But there is a trap here. Finding cannabis in a grave does not mean ancient people smoked it. To prove that, we need a different trace. Fire, hot stones, burners, and molecules left behind after thousands of years. So when did cannabis truly turn into smoke? The first thing to understand is that the Yanghai tomb did not draw attention only because it contained cannabis. It drew attention because of how the cannabis appeared in the grave. After about 2,700 years, the dry climate of the Turpan region helped those plants remain preserved to an unusually rare degree. Stems, leaves, fruits, and seeds were still clear enough for researchers to identify. This does not look like plant matter accidentally trapped in the soil. It looks like something deliberately placed in the grave, and in ancient tombs, intention is always more unsettling than accident. The living do not usually bury with the dead, things that are completely meaningless. Grave goods can be tools, weapons, food, jewelry, or objects for a journey after death. But here, what stands out is a plant that can be used for fiber, that can provide seeds, and that can affect the body and the mind. That very ambiguity is what makes Yanghai important. If it is rope, it belongs to labor. If it is seed, it belongs to food. If it is medicine, it belongs to the body. But if it was buried with the dead, it had crossed into another realm, the realm of belief. Honestly, what makes this discovery fascinating is not that ancient people had cannabis. What is more fascinating is why they thought this plant deserved to accompany a person into the grave. That question pushes us into a deeper layer. Yanghai shows that cannabis once held a special place, but it still does not tell us how that plant was used, because what is missing there is the trace of fire. And without fire, the story cannot yet turn into smoke. This is a very important boundary. A bundle of plants in a grave shows presence, but only a burner shows action. If ancient people used the seeds, the story would point toward food. If they used the fiber, the story would point toward rope, cloth, and tools. If they kept the plant in a grave, that would point toward ritual. But if we want to talk about smoking, we need to see that the plant was heated, burned, or placed on hot stones to create smoke or vapor. The act of smoking leaves almost no shape behind. It leaves no unusual skeleton, no voice, no feeling of the person who once inhaled the smoke. The smoke fades, the smell disappears, and the bodies of the participants also become dust. Only fire has a chance to preserve a clue, so the Yanghai tomb is not the final answer. It is like a door opening in the right direction, but it has not led us into the main room. To know when cannabis truly turned into smoke, we have to leave that 2,700-year-old bundle of plants and search for the place where smoke left burn marks. That trace appears in a place colder, higher, and quieter than Yanghai, Jirzankal cemetery in the Pamir region of western China. There, in tombs about 2,500 years old, archaeologists found wooden braziers with heated stones inside, charred wood, and tiny residues still clinging to them. This is the moment the story changes rhythm, because this time, researchers did not only find a plant, they found traces of an action that had happened. Someone had prepared the brazier, someone had heated the stones, someone had placed material inside, and from there, smoke or vapor rose in a funerary ritual. After more than 2 millennia, that smoke is gone. But chemical analysis still detected traces of cannabinoids in the braziers. To put it simply, at Jirzankal, cannabis did not just lie still beside the dead, it passed through fire. This is what separates Jirzankal from Yanghai. Yanghai shows us cannabis buried with the dead. Jirzankal shows us cannabis that was burned in a burial context. And that is a major leap. From a plant being kept, it became something activated. From a grave good, it became smoke. From silent evidence, it began to suggest a ritual with participants. So the question is no longer whether ancient people knew this plant. The sharper question is, what did they burn it for? And who stood in that smoke? What makes the Jirzankal discovery even more remarkable lies in the kind of cannabis burned Analyses published in 2019 showed that the traces in the burners did not look like the burning of weak hemp, a plant valued only for fiber. They suggested that the plants used here had higher levels of active compounds. In other words, the people standing around those burners may not have wanted only to create a fragrance. They may have been seeking a different state of mind. This is the hardest part of the story. Ancient people did not know what THC was. They had no chemical formula, no scale for measuring concentration, no scientific language to name that feeling. But they had experience. They could remember which plants created a different feeling, which plants had a stronger effect, which plants deserved to be saved for an important moment. This does not mean we can claim they deliberately cultivated stronger cannabis strains, nor can we know for certain where they got the plants, whom they traded with, or what criteria they used to choose them. But the Pamir region was not completely isolated. It lay along mountain corridors connecting Central Asia, South Asia, and East Asia. People, horses, metals, goods, ideas, and plants could all move along these ancient exchange routes. So the smoke at Jirzankal was not only the story of a group of people burning plants in a grave, it may be the trace of a world becoming connected, a world where people exchanged not only objects, but also ways of using objects. A plant once used for fiber and seed was now chosen for its effect on human sensation. This is the strongest point in the evidence. Around 2,500 years ago, someone burned cannabis with active properties in a funerary ritual. We cannot call that the absolute first time in human history. People may have done this earlier, but the evidence has not survived. What is more certain is that at Jirzankal, fire recorded a behavior clearly enough. And when fire appears beside a grave, everything begins to change color. If cannabis was burned inside a house, we might think of everyday life. If it was found in storage, we might think of food, fiber, or medicine. But at Jirzankal, that smoke appeared beside the dead. This makes it hard to understand as a simple recreational habit. It is closer to ritual, closer to a funeral, closer to the moment when the living must stand before a truth that cannot be negotiated with. Someone had departed, and no one could bring them back. In many ancient societies, death was not only a biological ending, it was an event that forced the whole community to respond. The living needed to bury, to say farewell, to place objects with the dead, to believe that this rupture still had some kind of order. Perhaps cannabis smoke took part in that moment, not necessarily as something for pleasure, but as a way to create an unusual atmosphere, a way to carry the participants out of their ordinary state, a way to turn loss into ritual. Ancien textuel source also give the story another echo. In the 5th century BCE, Herodotus described the Scythians throwing hemp onto hot stones to create thick vapor as part of a purification rite. We should not treat that account as absolute proof. Herodotus is an ancient textual source, not a chemical sample from a burner. But when placed beside Jirzankal, it shows something noteworthy. Across the steppes and the mountains of Eurasia, hemp smoke may have been tied to ritual more than we thought. And by this point, the question has changed completely. It is no longer just who smoked cannabis first. The more haunting question is why that smoke appeared precisely where humans were sending off the dead. Perhaps because humans were at their weakest, not from a lack of weapons, not from a lack of food, but because they could not do the thing they wanted most. They could not call the dead back. A fire can warm the body, but in a funeral, fire does something else too. It turns the visible into the invisible, plants into smoke, hot stones into vapor, a small object into a collective experience. And perhaps that very moment made the living feel that they could still do something. After 2,500 years, we can no longer hear what they said around the grave. We do not know who stood near the brazier, who inhaled that smoke, or whether they were afraid, what they believed, or what they hoped for. But that silence does not weaken the story. It makes the story colder, because all that remains is evidence. Ancient graves, burned stones, chemical traces, and a plant once passed through fire. The smoke disappeared long ago, but the question left behind has not disappeared. So when did ancient people begin smoking cannabis? The most cautious answer is, the clearest evidence we have today takes us back about 2,500 years, to Jirzankal in the Pamir region. Not because it has a more fascinating legend, but because it has what archaeology needs most, the trace of fire. From Yanghai, we know cannabis was buried with the dead. But at Jirzankal, the story fully shifts into smoke. That is a very important distance. A bundle of plants shows presence. A burner shows action. And perhaps this is what makes this history different from modern imagination. That smoke did not appear as a simple pleasure. It appeared in a funeral where humans stood before the thing they could control least, death. Honestly, what matters most is not how early, ancient people smoked. What matters is that they brought a plant into ritual to touch feelings that ordinary language could not fully express. Cannabis may once have been rope, seed, medicine, or a grave good, but when it passed through fire, it became a question, and that question is still hovering over ancient graves.